All right, welcome back. And let's continue developing our web app. So let's have a look at the state we are at the moment. Remember, I'm just in the main branch here. I'm going to start the application and I'm going to access this on localhost 3001. The application is quite simple so far. So I can just add items to list. Once I have something here that is not populated and I click on create, nothing happens. And then again, I can add duplicates. That is not an issue. So I can have the same value more than once. And perhaps more importantly, what is interesting here is that we have everything documented in tests, right? So this is perhaps the most important part. It's not that it is that it works in the browser, but more importantly is that we actually have everything documented, all these behaviors documented here, right? So should trigger the onSubmit function with a valid input, and it should not trigger if the input is invalid, so on and so forth. Now remember that the target here is to be a to-do list, right? So we should have some checkboxes here, and we should be able to toggle this as done and not done. Plus, the styling here is not really the best, so we're gonna work today to fix all these things. The first thing we will change here is we'll start, as always, with the tests. Remember, we want to write tests first. It's not because, it is because it also drives our code, and then it forces us to write as little code as possible to make the tests pass. But it's also very important to give us confidence on the changes we make in the future. We always want to have as many tests as possible documenting the behavior, because if we change something afterwards and some of the unrelated tests, maybe from another component, start to fail, then this is a very good indicator that we may have broken something without being aware, and it gives us confidence that we are not going to get these changes in production because the pipeline is going to stop in the tests, right? So tests are not only a very good way of driving the code, but they're also an essential part of securing our entire pipeline and preventing breaking changes from going into production. So we always want to start with the tests. I'm going to come here at the bottom of this file and I'm going to write a new test. So I'm going to say that it should toggle a task completion upon clicking on the task, so on the respective checkbox. Okay, so we don't have a checkbox at the moment. Don't worry, we will get there. But let's start with the test. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I just want to set up my user event.setup. That's going to give me the necessary object to interact with my component. And here I want to render the tasks element. So since everything happens within the tasks element, we will render the tasks element. So let's get first the item description, right? So the item description is going to be screen.getByRole, and this is going to be the role of a text box. All right. Let's see here on the top. I think we have pretty much the same here. We get the item description by the text box, and then we also get the create button, right? So we're going to have here also the create button here. We're going to get by role of a button. By the way, let me stop with the server now. So I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to run the tests on watch mode. So let's have a look again at the scripts. You will see here we have an npm run test watch. This will make sure that we are running the tests and that whenever we change something in our source code, the tests will rerun. As you can see here, all the tests are passing because we have no assertion, nothing here that would make the tests break. So let's continue writing the tests, and we actually want to write a test until we have it breaking, and then we take a pause and we go to the code, actual code, we make the test pass, and then we come back And we kind of repeat this loop of like writing a test, breaking it, fixing it by writing the actual code, and then refactoring anything that gets ugly in the actual code and possibly also in the tests. So the first thing I want to do here, now that I have my item description, is I want to click. So I'm going to say user.click in the item description. And I want to type something here. And that's going to be actually the keyboard here, not the type. And that's going to be first item. So now what I want to do is I want to click on the create button. Once I click on the create button, then this will create an item on the screen. All right, so once we click on the button, the next thing we want to do is we want to find the checkbox for this component. So actually, we want to find the checkbox for this first item that was created. So I'm going to say screen.getByRole, and I'm going to call this checkbox. And this is not random, all right? This has to be in an accessible role here so that it can be found. This is also very nice because it ensures that we are making as an accessible as possible solution. And yes, accessibility is becoming a more important topic these days. So that's definitely something we want to aim for. And here, the first thing that I'm going to do is I will just expect the task checkbox not to be null. All right, so I would like to have a task checkbox on the screen. Let's see what's going to happen here. And as we can see here, it's failing, right? So it's not able to find. I didn't even need this not to be null here because it's not able to find. It's already failing here, telling me that unable to find an accessible element with the role checkbox. What we want to do now is to come to the component where this list items are rendered. And this is within our tasks, within our task list. And you will see that this is our list item. So the first thing we're going to do here, and then again, now we finally have permission to go and write some production code. So that's what we're going to do. The first thing is we're going to use another component from the material UI, and this is the form control label. Now it requires a control, and that's going to be the checkbox we need. And it does require also a label. That's going to be the task.getTitle. All right. And this should actually be enough to make our tests pass. I'm going to save this, and you will see that everything will now, hopefully everything should pass. Wonderful. The last thing I want to do here is I just want to put a label placement in the end. So I make sure that this label here is actually displayed after the control. So we have checkbox label. Last thing I want to do here is I want to make sure that I'm consistently using the components from the material UI package. So here I'm substituting the li for list item and the ul for a list. All right. So this is just to ensure consistency and also to benefit from the design of material UI, from responsiveness, and also from behavior. Okay, so this is everything we actually had to do. Let's have a look at how things look on our website. So everything is still passing here, or at least it should be. And let's visit our local website here. Running exactly great. So I'm gonna create something here, and as you can see, there you go. We actually have a little nice checkbox here that we can interact with. And also when we create on the label, when we click on the label, then this turns or checks, it checks the item or it unchecks the item. That's great. All right, so the next thing we want to do here is to actually document this in a test, right? So because we are using material UI components, we should be able to trust that a checkbox gets checked when we click on it and it gets unchecked when we click on it again, if it is checked. But we want to document that this is actually happening in our code, okay? So the first thing that we will do is we have the task checkbox here, and the first one, so let's just do a little bit of refactoring here. We would expect the task checkbox to be in the document, right? This is a more specific measure. And here we also expect the task checkbox not to be checked. All right. So again, we add something to the screen. We expect it to be in the document and we expect it not to be checked as soon as it is added to the screen. Now we're going to click on it. So we'll say await user.click on the task checkbox. And now we would expect the task checkbox to be checked. And once we click again on the task checkbox, we would expect it not to be checked. Right? So we'll click it again and then we'll say not to be checked. The second thing we want to document is that we toggle the task completion when we click on a task label. So we should toggle a task completion upon clicking on the task label. Right? So here, that's pretty much, I think, just for documentation purposes, because as we already saw on the browser, that works and that comes out of the box with Material UI. But nonetheless, it does make sense for us to have this on our text, our tests. So I'm just gonna pretty much actually, let's have a look here. We want to get the checkbox, right? So there you go. And okay, we also want to make sure that we have these two parts here. And now we want to find not the, we want to click not on the task checkbox, but we want to find the task label. And this task label is the first item here that we've written. So I'm gonna put it here, const task label. And this will be screen get by text. Actually, this, I think there is a get by label text. I'm wondering if this will work or not. Let's have a look. Not sure if this will work out of the box with Material UI, but let's see. All right, everything working fine. So if I expect the task label to be in the document, everything should be fine. Let's have a look. Perfect. So now, if I await for the user to click on the task label, then I should expect the task checkbox to be checked. Okay, so I'm just clicking on the label. I'm expecting it to be checked. And then once again, I'll click on the label and I will expect it not to be checked. Perfect. Now, the last thing I want to test here is that it should actually toggle, so it should complete the correct task when clicking on its respective checkbox. Okay, so what we actually want to do here is we want to mark the respective task as completed and not any other task. So that's pretty much, setup is pretty much the same as before. We will copy this and we will add not only one task, but we will add two tasks. So the first task is here. We're going to add then the second task, and that's going to be a second item. And we click on the create button. So now here for all our tasks, we will say screen, dot get all by row. And we're going to get by the list item row. Since we are rendering the tasks here, then that's not a problem. We should be able to find only the components with a row of list item. And we would expect the tasks to have a length of 2. All right, so far so good. So now that we actually found all our tasks, what we want to do is we want to go inside of these list items, because remember here in our task list, the checkbox is inside of the list item. And we want to select the checkbox of the respective list item. So we're going to say const first task checkbox is going to be, and here is an interesting feature of the testing library. We have a within helper. Okay, and the within helper, and I'm wondering if it actually imported. No, it didn't import, so that should be within. Right, oops, that is incorrect. Yes, that's better. So now the within helper takes a component here, or it takes, and I'm not sure if it's a node or if it's a component. Let's have a look. It takes an element, right? Takes an element, and then we can say here within tasks 0, that is our first task, we say get by role, and that is the role of a checkbox. Okay, so for us to, I think that we are going to work only with the checkboxes, but if we need these tasks here, tasks 0 and tasks 1 afterwards, we can actually extract them to variables. But to keep things simple here, let's just get the checkbox for the first task and for the second task. Now we will expect the first task checkbox not to be checked, and the second task checkbox also not to be checked. Perfect. So now we will also click. So let's say user.click on the second task checkbox. And once the user clicks here, we will actually expect the second task checkbox to be checked, but the first one not to be checked. And then once the user also clicks on the first task checkbox, we would expect then both of them to be checked. Right? So this is a more, maybe a little bit more complex user interaction scenario. Let's see how this behaves in the test. Great, everything working good so far. So this is actually everything that we would want to change for this specific video. Let's have a look again at the server here, or actually at the application. So let's come to the, where is it? I think I closed it. Let's open it again. There you go. So now if I create here first item, I'm just going to create one, and then a second item, and I create here, then you see that I can just toggle them independently. So nothing super fancy here. The fancy stuff is actually happening in the tests. Okay. Again, I'm not really satisfied with this input nor with this button. So let's try to fix those two by adding some styles to the create task component, right? So this, now here we are talking about styles. And when we talk about styles, I wouldn't go that much like to test the styles too extensively in unit tests. That's more of a personal opinion. It's not really, there is not really a right answer or wrong answer, but I just find that styles are very often very volatile and they change all the time. And if we have like very specific tests for styles, then it becomes very cumbersome to maintain them. So the styles, in a sense, I do prefer to just leave them out of the functionality. Let's say I restrict my tests, most of them, to functionality, and I also use the proper selectors here, getting by role or getting by the label text, right? So here, for example, to make sure that we have as accessible components as possible, and this is already for me a very good step towards better web development, or actually towards better development in general. So first thing I'm going to do here is I will substitute the input for a text field, and I'm going to come here. I'm just going to remove the input, and then here I'm going to say that this is going to have a size of small, like so. Oops. And the onChange event stays here, everything is the same. And let's have a look again at how this looks in the browser. So now you see that we actually have something here that looks a little bit more, I mean, you could also use the input. Let's have a look what happens here once I use the input. It's going to be pretty much the same, I think. And let's see material UI, input. Let's see what we have for the, here. So I think that, oops, exactly perfect. So you see here that they actually recommend the text field, right? So the basic text field is complete form control, including label, input, and help text. So we can use only the input, but if we want to have a label, input, and help text, we can use the text field. That's what we're gonna do here then, all right? So apologies for that. There you go, text field, that's better. And we do want to add a couple of styles here, very simple styles. And with material UI, you add the styles inline by this SX prop. Okay, this we have, then we can set the width. And our width is going to be for smaller screens, it's going to be 100%. And for, so the smallest, like the smallest screens, 100%. And from the small breakpoint up, it's going to be 70%. All right, so just because, let's have a look here what happens if I have 100% for all of it. You will see that this is very large and the button comes to the bottom here. I'm not super worried about styles at this time, but I would like to have a slightly smaller width on smaller screens, or sorry, on larger screens. So now it's just an input here, and then we have the create. We can have a button here with a size of large. So that's gonna have a closer, like almost the same height as the text field. And we can use a different variant here just because the button then is going to look a little bit better on the screen. It's a little bit easier to see it. And we have this variant contained. Okay, so now what we will do is we will also have the SX here, and SX is going to, first thing, I'm going to remove the box shadow because I don't like the box shadow of the button that comes with material UI. So we can do that by none and then passing an important here. And we also want the width, and the width is going to be for the smallest screens is going to be 100%, and for the small upwards, we're going to say just unset this, meaning get back to the original width. Okay, and then we also want to have a bit of a margin top here at the bottom, because on the smallest, so let's have a look here. Just let's see how this looks on the screen. Okay, yeah, actually, I don't like very much this contained here. I'm just gonna remove the contained and let's leave it as it is, like so. Maybe we can change it later. So let's see why we need the margin, right? If I actually make this smaller, you will see that, all right, yeah, the button is a little bit close to the input. So I just want to add a very small margin here. So my margin top is going to be, again, on the smallest with 12 pixels, and from the small up, I'm going to unset it, meaning just reset that to its default value. And then we have a little bit of a margin here that makes it a bit easier to work with. Okay, so now here again, nothing super fancy. There we have our button. I can type something that still works. All right, now the last thing I want to do is in my index, so in my app component, here we have a container with a max width of large, and then I want to add a margin top of maybe 12 pixels, just to have this a little bit off the top of the screen. Once again, what I'm doing here is a lot of inline styling as we progress with this application, as we start to develop more components, and as we need consistency in the design, and therefore we start introducing the applications in styles, we will work towards extracting this to their own style components. I'm not sure if which library that's going to be. Maybe that's going to be emotion, or at least to have a centralized place where we will have the styles standardized. Okay, for now, I just want to make sure that we have a good feeling here. And then as we evolve the application, we will also evolve the setup. Okay, let's not worry too much about it. Let's not spend too much time here. But now, as you can see, it's looking a little bit better than before. And what we want to do, let's have a look at the tests. Everything is passing. That's great. So I'm going to stop the tests. I'm going to run the format script. And let's have a look here if there are any issues with the linting and if there are any issues with the TypeScript. Okay, so we have this npm run tsc check. I believe there are no problems, but just to make sure, perfect. So here we can add everything. And actually, let's have a look. There is a more interesting way of adding stuff. Normally normally I do things from the command line. I'm comfortable with this. That's not a problem. But if you want to really inspect the changes here, right, you can open and compare. This is the diff, and you can see that, okay, in the file app.tsx, I will add these changes once I click on the checkbox here. In the create task, I have these changes here, which look fine. So I'm just gonna click here. Then on the task list, I have these changes, which also look fine. I'm gonna click here. And then on the tests, I have more extensive changes here at the bottom once I add my tests. So I click here, I can add the commit message if I want to. So this is another way for us to commit changes. Honestly, I personally just prefer to use the command line. Another way that we can do it is to pass a -p flag to git add, and this will actually show us different hunks, as it calls it here, and we can add them or not to our commit. Okay, so I'm gonna add this one, I'm gonna add this one, I'm also gonna add this one, and add this one and this one. So now we have everything added for commit, and I'll just commit with a, let's call this a feature, right? Add checkbox and improve styling. Improve styles. So let's put this added checkbox and improved styles, just because that is already done. That is gonna run all our pre-commit hooks. Once this is done, we can then push this to the remote repository. I'm gonna give a pull with a rebase here to make sure that we have the latest version. We do have the latest version because I'm working alone, right? So that's like nobody is gonna be here fiddling with my master branch. But if there were more people working on the project, you would want to pull this always before you push and make sure you rebase your current commits to the origin, to the remote master branch, to the remote commits. And then once that is done, you can push. Aha, I think my credentials expired. Give me just a second. I'm gonna log in another terminal and I'll be back here. All right, fixed. So git push, and now that should work perfect. Once I push this, oops, why does it have the test? Probably that's because I was running the tests to make sure that everything was fine. All right, let's go back to the main. Apologies for that. Clean everything, git push, and now that should be fine. All right, perfect. So that's it, and let's have a look at how this is looking in our CI/CD. So now we have pushed this, and we want to make sure that this gets deployed to Netlify. So here we have our repository. You can see our push here on the round. Yeah, we committed some minutes ago. And then I just have this test branch here that I was using for testing the authentication. Can remove this. And let's have a look at our CI/CD workflow. Right, so now we need to wait a little bit. Again, this takes a few minutes. Once that is done, I'll come back. Here we are, we have the website URL. As always, we can access this. You can also access this. It's still live, yes. And it is actually now looking a little bit better. So Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.